Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The sound of metal on metal is crisp and regular in the gray workshop. Marcus Wilson's fingertips dance with precision on a car engine, and the cold parts seem to come to life in his hands. As a mechanical engineer for 15 years, his understanding of machinery has reached a certain intuitive level. He could feel the subtle changes in each part and hear the tiniest sounds of malfunction. Hiding in your shelter again. The familiar voice came from the doorway. Marcus didn't look up, but the corners of his mouth turned up slightly. Sophia, his wife and marriage partner of 10 years, stood there with 2 cups of coffee in her hand. She was dressed in simple jeans and a white t-shirt, her curly brown hair draped casually over her shoulders, her makeup subtle, and she looked much younger than her actual age. "You know me." Marcus wiped motor oil from his hands and turned to face her. "I can think here." Sophia approached and handed him a cup of coffee. Her perfume smelled stronger than usual, a new scent that Marcus wasn't too familiar with. "I know, your ideas are always born amongst these steel monsters." She looked around the workshop, her eyes landing on the patent certificates hanging on the wall. "That's why Ashton Industries can't do without you." Marcus took the coffee and took a sip. "We can't get away from each other. I create, they produce." Recently, Marcus had noticed subtle but not negligible changes. Sophia was coming home later and later, explaining that it was because hospital care had become hectic. Her smile was no longer so easy. Her eyes always drifted and she rarely looked him directly in the eye. She had started to wear a new perfume, and her cell phone always came with a passcode and was often held in her hand. As an engineer accustomed to observing details, these changes raised his alarm, but he chose to remain silent for the time being to gather more information. "Your brother called again," Sophia said, a deliberate indifference in her tone. "He said there's something he wants to talk to you about that new project." Daniel, Marcus's brother, is also one of the executives at Ashton Industries. As the company's director of sales, Daniel is responsible for bringing Marcus' innovative designs to market. The brothers were close on the surface, but Marcus had always sensed the occasional flash of jealousy in Daniel's eyes. Even though Daniel was 5 years older than Marcus and occupied a higher position, it was always Marcus' technical talents that brought in most of the company's profits and reputation. "I'll call back later," Marcus said. "Let me finish this first." Sophia nodded and kissed him lightly on the forehead before leaving, but the kiss felt perfunctory and brief. "Don't forget we have dinner tonight, with your parents." Marcus nodded and watched Sophia leave the workshop before turning back to his workbench. His fingers rediscovered their rhythm, but his thoughts began to wander. Why had Daniel's contact with Sophia become so frequent lately? Why was there always something strange about the atmosphere whenever Daniel came to the house? These questions swirled in his mind, and a sense of foreboding began to take root in his heart. Dinner took place in the dining room of Marcus's parents' home, a cozy but slightly dated space with walls filled with family photos, mostly displays of Daniel's accomplishments. Marcus's father, Richard, a retired mechanical engineer, is talking at length about the company's latest developments. His mother, Helen, is busy shuttling between the kitchen and the dining room, making sure everyone's plates are full, especially Daniel's. "I heard you got a patent for your new hydraulic system design," Richard said to Marcus, a twinkle of grudging pride in his eyes. "That's creative, but be careful not to take too many risks." Marcus smiled. "Thanks, Dad. But my designs wouldn't be where they are today without your guidance in the beginning." "Don't forget Daniel," Helen interjects, while scooping more mashed potatoes onto Daniel's plate. "Without his salesmanship and management skills, your design would probably just be buried in a pile of drawings." Technicians always need someone to show them how to turn their ideas into reality. Daniel shook his head modestly. "I'm just presenting Marcus' ideas to the world." His eyes met Sophia's briefly and then quickly moved away, but the moment was electric enough for Marcus to take notice. Throughout the evening, Marcus felt a strange tension in the air. Daniel showed excessive attention to Sophia, making eye contact far beyond what was needed for normal socialization, while Sophia avoided making much eye contact with Marcus. His parents seemed to be more enthusiastic about Daniel than they are about him, although Marcus is used to the differential treatment. After dinner, Marcus excuses himself to go to the restroom, but in reality, he needs some space to think. As he passes the guest room, he hears whispers coming through the half-open doorway. Out of intuition, He slowed down and stood outside the door. "We can't go on like this," Sophia's voice, low and urgent. "Just give me a little more time," Daniel replied, his tone a mixture of soothing and nervousness. "I need to make sure everything is going according to plan. Marcus won't find out. He's too focused on his invention." "But it's not fair to him," Sophia said, a hint of hesitation in her voice. "He's your brother." "Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind," Daniel said, his voice becoming lower. "And believe me, it's ultimately best for everyone." Marcus felt a wave of vertigo, his stomach turning. What were they talking about? What plans? Why was his name mentioned? He wanted to storm into the room and question them, but years of training as an engineer kept him calm. He needed more information, needed hard evidence before he could act. With a heavy heart, Marcus quietly returned to the table and pretended everything was normal. But from that moment on, he began to pay more attention to Sophia and Daniel's every move, looking for any clues that might confirm his fears. Over the next few weeks, Marcus becomes increasingly alert. He notices that Sophia often receives text messages late at night and then quickly deletes them. Her work hours become irregular, and she sometimes stays out all night claiming that there is an emergency at the hospital, and her references to Daniel become frequent, but always with a deliberate indifference in her tone. As an engineer accustomed to solving problems, Marcus decides to gather more evidence. He doesn't want to believe the worst, but he needs to know the truth. One night, when Sophia claims to be working late, Marcus decides to follow her. He drives to the hospital, but doesn't see Sophia's car in the parking lot. He dialed the hospital's phone number and asked if he could find Nurse Sophia Wilson, only to be told that Sophia was not scheduled to work today. Marcus' heart sank. He sat in his car, thinking about what to do next. Intuition told him that if Sophia wasn't at the hospital, she was probably with Daniel. His heart ached like a knife at the thought of that possibility. But he needed to be sure, needed to face the truth, no matter how painful. He drove to Daniel's apartment, his thoughts oscillating between anger, doubt, and denial the entire ride. He felt a wave of nausea when he saw Sophia's car parked under Daniel's apartment building. Marcus sat in the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white from the exertion. Should he go up there? Should he grab them on the spot? Or should he wait for a more opportune moment? In the end, reason prevailed once again. He needed more than just seeing Sophia's car parked there. He needed irrefutable proof. Marcus started the car and drove away from the scene, a plan already beginning to form in his mind. Back at home, Marcus went straight to his studio, the place that had always been his safe haven. He turned on his computer and began going through Sophia's email and text message records. As the administrator of the home network, he had access to all devices connected to the home Wi-Fi. He knew this was ethically questionable, but at the moment he needed the truth more than anything. The search didn't take long. In Sophia's emails, Marcus found extensive correspondence with Daniel that ranged from intimate greetings to detailed plans about how to get the detailed designs of his latest invention from Marcus and how to sell them on the international market, bypassing Ashton Industries. Even more heartbreaking, he discovers lovey-dovey text messages between Sophia and Daniel, confirming that they've been carrying on an affair for months. Judging by the content of the messages, Sophia had not only betrayed Marcus's relationship, but was also involved in a scheme to steal his intellectual property. Marcus sat in front of his computer and felt his blood run cold throughout his body. His wife and brother, the two people he trusted the most, had joined forces to betray him. His first reaction was anger, wanting an immediate confrontation, but then a calmer thought floated into his mind. If he acted now, he could lose everything, including the fruits of his years of work. No, he needed a better plan. A plan that would ensure that he not only protected his own interests, but also made those who betrayed him pay. Marcus wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and began to think about his next move. Sophia returns home the next morning looking tired but calm. She explains that an emergency at the hospital forced her to stay there all night. Marcus nods his head in understanding, a gentle smile on his face as if everything is business as usual. "You look exhausted," he said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Go get some rest. I need to take care of something at the office." Sophia gratefully accepted the coffee and kissed his cheek. "You're always so thoughtful." Marcus smiled, the bitterness in his heart almost overflowing. "For you." always. After leaving the house, instead of going to the office, Marcus headed straight to a private detective agency. He needed more evidence, not just emails and text messages, but actual photo and video evidence in case of possible future legal action. Over the next few weeks, Marcus continued to play the role of the clueless husband while secretly preparing his plan. He met with the company's legal counsel to discuss how to protect his patent rights. He backed up his latest designs and ongoing projects to a secure server that only he had access to, and he began to look for new investors, those who could help him get out of Ashton Industries. Reports and photographs provided by a private investigator confirm Marcus's worst fears. Sophia and Daniel aren't just having an affair, they're also meeting regularly with Ashton Industries' competitors in an apparent attempt to sell Marcus's designs. Faced with this evidence, Marcus decides it's time to take action. He arranged a private meeting with the company's CEO and showed him all the evidence he had gathered. Shocked, the CEO immediately agreed to remove Daniel from the company and promised to fully protect Marcus' intellectual property. But for Marcus, that wasn't enough. He wants more than career security. He wants justice, and to make those who betrayed him pay. And to do that, he'll need to be more careful, more precisely planned every step of the way. When Sophia pushed open the door to her house, it was dark. She fumbled to turn on the light and was surprised to find Marcus sitting on the couch in the living room, photos and papers scattered on the coffee table in front of him. "You're back," Marcus said calmly, no emotion in his voice. "No emergencies at the hospital tonight?" Sophia froze in place, sensing the tension in the air. "Marcus, what happened?" Marcus picks up a photo and hands it to her. "Maybe you can tell me what happened, honey." The photo shows Sophia and Daniel kissing in a hidden corner of a restaurant. Sophia's face instantly turns pale, her lips quivering, unable to make a sound. "No words," Marcus continued, his voice cold as ice. "What about this?" He held up another photo showing Sophia and Daniel meeting with a competitor of Ashton Industries. "It's not what it looks like." Sophia finally finds her voice, but it sounds weak and uncertain. Marcus sneers. "What does it look like? Educate me, Sophia. Tell me what it's like for my wife and brother to cheat on me behind my back while planning to steal my work product." Sophia's shoulders slumped and tears began to flow. "Marcus, we never wanted to hurt you." "Oh, really?" Marcus' voice was filled with sarcasm. "Then what way are you showing your love? By betraying me? By trying to steal my intellectual property?" Sophia walks towards him and reaches out as if to touch him, but Marcus steps back and avoids her hand. "Things are getting complicated," she said. "Daniel says that your designs are undervalued by the company and that they're not giving you the trust and resources you deserve. We're just trying to help you get a better return." "By selling out my designs to a competitor?" Marcus asked sternly. "Don't insult my intelligence, Sophia. I saw the emails, I saw the messages. You two sold me out for money, for your own benefit." Sophia's demeanor suddenly changed. The tears disappeared and were replaced by an indifference. "Well, you want the truth?" "Yes, Daniel and I are together. We've been in love with each other for a while now. You're always so caught up in your work, Marcus. Have you ever thought about how I feel? I need someone who can notice me, who can really care about what I need." Those words stabbed Marcus in the heart like a knife, but he didn't show it. Instead, he kept his cool. "So it's my fault? Because I worked hard to provide a good life for us, for you?" "It's not just the work," Sophia countered, her voice becoming sharp. "It's your whole attitude. You always think you're smarter than everyone, always think you know what's best. Daniel at least listened to me and respected my opinion." Marcus shook his head, a bitter smile on his lips. "What a convenient excuse, Sophia. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow I'll contact a lawyer to start the divorce process. You can pack your things and leave." Sophia's eyes widened. "What? Just like that? That's the end of a 10-year marriage." "No," Marcus corrected her. "It was the moment you decided to sleep with my brother and try to steal my work product that our marriage ended. I'm just finding out about it now." Sophia's expression changes from shock to anger. "You think you can just kick me out? This is my home too." "Actually," Marcus said calmly, "the house is in my name, premarital property. You can discuss it with your lawyer, but I'm sure you'll find that your position is less favorable than you think, especially considering that I have evidence of your involvement in industrial espionage." Sophia's face turned paler. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm just stating the facts. Now, Please gather your personal belongings and leave. You can go to Daniel's, since you've become so close." Sophia stood there as if weighing her options. Finally, she lifted her chin with a challenging gleam in her eye. "You're going to regret this, Marcus. You think you've won, but this is just the beginning." Marcus looked at her calmly. "I've already lost the trust and loyalty of two of my favorite people. I have nothing more to lose." Sophia didn't answer and turned towards the bedroom and began to gather her belongings. Marcus sat back down on the couch, feeling a strange sense of calm. The hardest part was over. Now it was time to execute the next phase of his plan. The divorce proceedings had proceeded more complicated than expected. Sophia and Daniel hired a team of expensive lawyers to try to secure partial ownership of Marcus' patents. They claimed that Sophia, as Marcus' wife, had provided support and inspiration in his innovation process and was therefore entitled to a share of the patent proceeds. Marcus' legal team was well prepared. Not only did they have evidence of Sophia and Daniel conspiring to steal intellectual property, they also had detailed records proving that all the patents were done independently by Marcus without any outside contributions. The court trial lasted several months. Daniel tried to use his influence in the company, but the CEO had sided with Marcus. To make matters worse, when the auditing department started looking into Daniel's accounts, they found more irregularities. He had been embezzling company funds to maintain his secret relationship with Sophia. Ultimately, the court ruled in Marcus' favor. Not only did Sophia receive no patent rights, she faced criminal charges for her involvement in industrial espionage. Although she avoided imprisonment in the end, her nursing license was revoked and her career was completely destroyed. Daniel's end was even more tragic. In addition to being fired from Ashton Industries, he faced charges of embezzlement. Although he managed to avoid imprisonment, the huge fine left him bankrupt. More importantly, his reputation was completely tarnished within the industry, and no company wanted to hire an executive with such a tainted reputation. Marcus' parents chose to side with Daniel in this process. They think Marcus has gone too far and should give his brother a chance. This prejudice hurts Marcus deeply, but it also strengthens his resolve. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Marcus received a phone call that changed his life. "Marcus Wilson?" On the other end of the line was a low, male voice. "Yes, and may I ask who you are?" "My name is Victor Reyes, and I represent Vista Innovation Group. We've been following your case and are very interested in your talents." Marcus frowned. "If you are after my patents, I must tell you they currently belong to Ashton Industries." Victor chuckles softly. "No, Mr. Wilson, it is not your past work that interests us. We believe your best innovations are still ahead of you. Vista is willing to offer you a new platform, complete creative freedom, and the recognition and rewards you deserve." The offer came at the right time. Although the CEO supported Marcus, the atmosphere within the company had become uncomfortable. Many sympathized with Daniel and thought Marcus was being too aggressive. "I needed time to think about it," Marcus said. "Of course," Victor responds. "But remember, opportunities don't wait forever. Sometimes the best revenge is success." After hanging up the phone, Marcus was deep in thought. Staying at Ashton meant continuing to face the shadows of the past, while joining Vista meant a fresh start. What's more, if he could succeed at Vista, it would be the best comeback for all those who betrayed him. After much deliberation, Marcus decided to accept Vista's offer. His departure left Ashton Industries in a quandary. Without Marcus Innovations, the company quickly lost its competitive edge. 3 years later, Vista Innovation Group has become a leader in hydraulics and machine automation. Marcus, as Chief Technology Officer, not only receives a generous salary, but also owns shares in the company. His new designs revolutionized the industry and brought Vista huge profits. Meanwhile, Ashton Industries was struggling. Without Marcus as its innovation engine, the company's new products were lackluster. Market share was shrinking and the stock price continued to fall. Industry insiders were talking about Ashton possibly facing bankruptcy or a takeover. Marcus looks out over the city from his high-rise office in Vista, the latest industry report in hand. Ashton's plight gives him a cold satisfaction. But it wasn't enough. He wanted to do more than just watch them fail. He wanted to end them himself. "Boss," his assistant Sandra said as she walked into the office, "the board meeting starts in 5 minutes." "Thanks, Sandra. Tell them I have an important proposal." At the board meeting, Marcus presented a bold plan, the acquisition of Ashton Industries. From a business standpoint, Marcus explained, Ashton is going downhill, but they still have some valuable assets, manufacturing facilities, distribution network, customer relationships. If we can acquire them at a low price and integrate these resources, it will significantly strengthen Vista's market position. Victor Reyes, Vista's CEO, nodded thoughtfully. But there are risks in acquiring a failing company. We'll need to devote significant resources to reorganization. I'm confident I can turn things around, Marcus said, determination shining in his eyes. Give me the opportunity to lead this project, and I promise I won't disappoint. The board eventually approved the proposal. Marcus knew that the real revenge was about to begin. The acquisition negotiations went exceptionally well. Ashton's board had no choice. Either accept Vista's offer or face bankruptcy and liquidation. Marcus specifically asked to be involved in the negotiations. He wanted to see those who had despised him bow down. On the day of the negotiations, Marcus walked into Ashton's conference room and saw many familiar faces. They all remembered Marcus, the engineer who had done great things for the company and was now back as a representative of the acquirer. Gentlemen, Marcus said calmly, I'm sure you're all aware of the current situation. Vista's offer is your best bet. One of the older directors cleared his throat. Mr. Wilson, we know that some unpleasant things have happened in the past. But for the sake of the company's future, we hope to reach an agreement that will benefit both parties. Marcus smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, of course. Vista's offer is fair. We pay a reasonable price, keep some of our employees, and continue to operate certain production lines. But there's one condition. What condition? All current executives must leave immediately, with no severance pay. This includes anyone associated with Daniel Wilson, the former director of sales. The conference room fell silent. They all knew what this meant. Marcus was going to purge everyone who had ever supported Daniel. This is extortion, one executive said angrily. Marcus shrugged. This is business. Accept or reject, the choice is yours. But remember, you will be left with nothing if you go into bankruptcy and liquidation. In the end, Ashton had no choice but to accept Vista's terms. After the acquisition was completed, Marcus became president of the newly formed Vista Ashton division. One of his first actions was to completely reorganize the company, firing all those involved in past scandals. Daniel's situation was even more dismal. After the bankruptcy, he tried various jobs, but no one would hire him. His reputation was completely ruined, and he became synonymous with betrayal and failure in the industry. In the end, he could only find a job as a low-level salesman at a small parts supplier, earning just enough to make ends meet. Sophia's situation was no better. After losing her nursing license, she was unable to work in the healthcare industry. She tried other careers, but lacked the relevant skills and experience. Eventually, she ended up working as a waitress in a cheap restaurant, working 12 hours a day and still struggling to pay her rent. Marcus occasionally receives news about their current situation. Each time he heard of their plight, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This is the price of betrayal, he thought. They had taken his trust and love, and now he had taken everything from them. But the story of revenge isn't over yet. Marcus realized that it wasn't enough to just watch them suffer. He wants to make sure they can never turn over a new leaf and live in his shadow forever. One day, Marcus' assistant informs him of a visitor. She says her name is Sophia Lewis and insists on seeing you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Lewis was Sophia's maiden name, and it seemed she was trying to hide her identity. Tell her to wait 20 minutes, then bring her in. Marcus barely recognized Sophia when she walked into the office. The formerly radiant woman now looked haggard, her cheap clothes and tired expression making her look 10 years older. Marcus, her voice was soft. Thank you for wanting to see me. What can I do for you, Sophia? Marcus' tone was cold and distant. Sophia took a deep breath. I know I'm in no position to ask you for anything, but I'm really desperate. I need a job, any job. Marcus leaned back in his chair and scrutinized her. Why should I help you? Because once upon a time we had good times, Sophia said, tears glistening in her eyes. Because despite my mistakes, 10 years of marriage shouldn't end like this. Marcus sneered. 10 years of marriage? You chose to end it, Sophia. When you crawled into my brother's bed, when you conspired to steal my work product. "It was a mistake," Sophia whispered. "I know it's too late to say anything now, but I really regret it." Marcus was silent for a moment, then said, "I can offer you a job." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really?" "In the cleaning department of our factory," Marcus continued. "Night shift, minimum wage. You'll be required to wear a uniform and clean the production floor and offices, including my office." Sophia's face turned pale, but she knew she had no choice. "I accept." "On one more condition," Marcus said. "You must use your real name, Sophia Wilson. I want everyone to know who you are, what you were, and what you've become." It was elaborate humiliation. Every night, Sophia would clean the offices that she used to visit when she was Marcus' wife. She would meet people who knew her and see the contempt and pity in their eyes. But she has no choice. This job at least gives her a roof over her head. Daniel's fate was equally tragic. When he hears that Vista has acquired Ashton, he tries to contact Marcus in hopes of getting a job. Marcus agrees to see him, but makes even harsher conditions. "You could work on an assembly line," Marcus told his brother, "the most basic laborer position, doing the manual labor you once despised." Daniel's pride struggles, but the pressure of reality makes him bow down. "I accept." "Very well," Marcus said. "But remember, you will obey all orders from your superiors, including those who were once under you. Any insubordination or slackness will result in immediate dismissal." Thus, the former sales director became an ordinary worker on the production line, repeating the monotonous assembly work every day. His colleagues knew about his past, and no one sympathized with him. They remember how arrogant Daniel used to be, and now they only feel retribution when they see his downfall. Marcus makes sure that Daniel and Sophia are placed on different shifts and locations to prevent them from ever meeting or joining forces. He wants them to suffer loneliness and humiliation individually, with no chance of comforting each other. As time goes on, Marcus' revenge becomes more and more elaborate. He is not satisfied with simple humiliation, but wants to destroy their wills completely. He puts Sophia in charge of cleaning the executive floor, including his office. Every time she cleans, she sees the various awards and honors Marcus has received, the proof of his success. On the wall hangs a chart of Vista's stock price, the rising curve seeming to mock her choices. For Daniel, Marcus arranged for him to work on the toughest production line. It was hot, noisy, and extremely hard work. Daniel's body began to suffer, but he didn't dare complain. He knew it was his only source of income. Marcus also makes sure that their wages are always just enough for basic survival. Any chance of a raise or a bonus is vetoed for any number of reasons. He wanted them to always be on the brink of poverty and never see hope. At one point, Marcus arranged a special company-wide meeting to celebrate Vista's record profits. He stood on the stage and gave a spirited speech, and among the employees on the stage were Sophia in her janitor's uniform and Daniel in his blue overalls. "Today's success," Marcus says, sweeping his gaze over them with intentionality, "proves the value of honesty, hard work, and innovation. It also proves that betrayal and deception will ultimately fail." At the end of the speech, the staff applauded enthusiastically, except for Sophia and Daniel. They kept their heads down, bearing the stares cast by those around them. Everyone knew their story. Everyone knew they were the targets of Marcus' revenge. Marcus' parents are not immune. When they were in financial trouble for supporting Daniel, they came to Marcus in a brazen way. "Son," Richard said, a grudging humility in his voice, "we know we've done wrong in the past, but we are your parents after all." Marcus looked at them, his expression cold. "You chose to side with the betrayer. Now bear the consequences." "We're old," Helen cried. "No income, and our savings are running out." Marcus considered for a moment, then said, "I can arrange for you to work in the company cafeteria. Father will do the dishes, and Mother will clear the tables. Minimum wage, no other benefits." The once proud elderly couple had no choice. They accepted the job and labored every day in the employee cafeteria, serving those they once despised as inferior. Marcus arranged for them to work during the lunch rush to ensure that they would meet the maximum number of people, including Daniel and Sophia. Marcus took a twisted pleasure in watching the family meet in such humble circumstances without being able to comfort each other. 5 years later, Vista continues to thrive under Marcus' leadership. He became a legend in the industry, not only for his technological innovations, but also for his business skills. The press called him an engineering wizard and a business genius. And those who betrayed him? They still live in his shadow. Sophia's health deteriorated as a result of long night shifts and malnutrition. She developed chronic fatigue syndrome, but could not afford proper treatment. She applied to the company for a day shift, but was denied on the grounds of operational necessity. Daniel's situation is worse. The long hours of physical labor had broken his body. He suffered from a serious herniated disc in his lower back and spent every day in pain. But he was afraid to call in sick. Vista's policy states that more than the required number of days of sick leave will result in termination. Marcus's parents were also struggling to get by. Aging and frail, they were finding it increasingly difficult to cope with the intensity of the cafeteria work. But they know that homelessness awaits them if they lose their jobs. Marcus receives regular reports on their condition. Each report gave him satisfaction. This is justice, he told himself. They had teamed up to destroy his life, and now he was just returning their kindness. But the climax of his revenge was yet to come. One day, Marcus called a special meeting to announce a major decision. Vista would close the former Ashton facility and move production to a new, more automated plant. This meant massive layoffs, including the line Daniel was working on. But, Marcus said at the meeting, we will provide retraining opportunities for the affected employees. Top performers could be offered positions at the new plant. Daniel, of course, was not one of the top performers. Years of manual labor had destroyed his health, and he couldn't pass any fitness tests. He would lose his job, and at his age and health, finding a new one would be next to impossible. Sophia's fate is equally tragic. The new cleaning service will be outsourced to a specialized company, and all existing cleaners will be laid off. There will be no severance pay, only basic unemployment insurance. As for Marcus' parents, the cafeteria will be modernized to a self-service model. No more need for so much manual labor. Marcus planned all this carefully. He didn't want to simply fire them, that would be too kind. He wanted them to feel hope before he crushed it. At the staff meeting where the layoffs were announced, Marcus made a point of watching the reactions of Daniel, Sophia, and his parents. He saw the fear and despair in their eyes, and it gave him a morbid pleasure. But remember, Marcus said at the end of his speech, this is not the end, but a new beginning. There will always be a place in Vista for those loyal, hard-working employees. His gaze swept over the four men, meaningfully. They all understood that the statement did not include them. Daniel was the first to break down when the layoff notices went out. Years of humiliation and hardship had finally crushed him. He attempted suicide, swallowing a large amount of sleeping pills. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he was found in time to be taken to the hospital. Upon learning the news, Marcus made a merciful decision. The company would pay for Daniel's medical expenses, but only if he received mandatory treatment in a psychiatric hospital. I don't want him to die, Marcus told Sandra. Death is too cheap. I want him to live and remember every day what his choices led to. Sophia tries to find another job, but her resume is ruined. No one wanted to hire a tainted former nurse, especially when her former employer, Vista, was so influential in the industry. Eventually, she had to settle for a job as a cleaner at a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The pay is lower and the conditions worse, but she has no choice. Marcus's parents were faced with an even starker choice: accept a meager pension to get by on, or keep looking for work. But who would employ two people in their 70s? They wrote to Marcus, begging for forgiveness and help. Marcus didn't reply, but he made sure they received a copy of Vista's latest earnings report. Profits were at another record high, and his personal fortune had reached 9 figures. That's Marcus' philosophy of revenge: not quick destruction, but slow torture. Let them live, but a life worse than death. Let them be reminded of their failures and see his successes every day. 7 years later, Marcus stands on the balcony of his newly purchased mansion overlooking the city at night. He is now not only Vista's CTO, but also its second largest shareholder. His innovations continue to drive the company forward, and his wealth continues to grow. His personal assistant updated him. Daniel is still being treated in a psychiatric hospital. Doctors say he suffers from severe depression and delusions and believes he is still Ashton's sales director. He refuses to accept reality and lives in his fantasy world. Sophia's health deteriorated further. Long-term malnutrition and overwork caused her to develop several chronic diseases. She applied for government medical aid, but the subsidy was meager and only enough to maintain the most basic treatment. Marcus' parents are no longer able to work. They live in government-provided low-cost housing and rely on food stamps and charity organizations to get by. They have tried to contact Marcus, but all their letters have been returned. Make sure they have the basics, Marcus instructed. I don't want them to starve or freeze to death. But that's about it. He walked back into the interior, which was lavishly decorated and filled with artwork and trophies. His various patents and medals of honor hung on the walls. He took a seat on the leather couch and sipped his expensive whiskey. This is what success tastes like, he thought. Not only material success, but seeing those who had hurt him get what they deserved. Marcus's story became a cautionary tale that was widely circulated in the industry. People talked about his success and what happened to those who betrayed him. It reinforced a simple truth: betrayal has a price. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with that. He continued to spy on them, making sure they could never turn over. When he hears of a charitable organization that wants to help Sophia, he becomes the organization's primary sponsor through a donation, and then influences them to change the criteria for aid just enough to exclude Sophia. When Daniel's condition improves and he may be discharged from the hospital, Marcus arranges for stricter evaluation criteria to ensure that Daniel is recognized as still needing long-term treatment. When his parents applied for better housing, Marcus ensured through his network of contacts that the application was rejected. This control gave Marcus a godlike feeling. He controls their fate and determines their level of suffering. It was more satisfying than simple revenge. 10 years have passed. Marcus is now the CEO of Vista, a company that has become an industry giant under his leadership. His personal fortune puts him on the Forbes list of billionaires. The media hailed him as a legend who started with nothing. Marcus delivered the keynote address at an industry summit. He spoke about the importance of innovation, persistence, and integrity. My success, he said, is based on one simple principle: never betray someone who trusts you. Because the cost of betrayal is far more expensive than you can imagine. The stage erupted in applause. The audience was moved by his story and inspired by his success. What they didn't know was that on the other side of this success story were 4 lives that were completely destroyed. After the speech, Marcus's new assistant reported to him, "Sir, the news just came in. Daniel Wilson has died in a psychiatric hospital. The cause of death was organ failure." Marcus nodded without any change in his expression. "Arrange a decent funeral. After all, he was once my brother." Also, the assistant continued, Sophia Wilson was found collapsed in the hotel where she worked. The doctors say she may not last much longer. Make sure she gets basic medical attention. Marcus said, "We're not savages." A few days later, Marcus attended Daniel's funeral. Few people attended. Most had forgotten the once prominent sales director. Marcus stood at the grave and watched as the coffin was lowered into the earth. "You're finally free, brother," he said softly. "I hope you make better choices on the other side." After the funeral, Marcus visited Sophia in the hospital. She was lying in a hospital bed, skinny and slack-eyed. Seeing Marcus, a flicker of recognition flashed in her eyes. "Marcus," she said weakly, "you won." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the once beautiful woman. "I didn't win, Sophia. I just didn't lose." Sophia closed her eyes as tears slipped down her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry." "I know," Marcus said, "but sorry doesn't change anything." He stood up and prepared to leave. Before he left, he looked back. "I'll pay for your medical bills. It's the last thing I can do." Sophia died shortly after he left. Marcus made the same funeral arrangements for her, but he did not attend. His parents were completely devastated when they learned of the 2 deaths. They realized that their choices had led to this, but it was too late. Shortly afterward, they passed away one after the other, with remorse and pain. Marcus arranged funerals for them all, making sure they were treated with basic respect. But he did not attend any of them. To him, they were a thing of the past. Now all those who betrayed him are gone. Marcus' revenge was finally complete. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, looking at the busy city below, but felt a strange emptiness in his heart. Revenge had given him the motivation to build a business empire. But now that the revenge was complete, he suddenly didn't know what to do next. Just then, his phone rang. It was an entrepreneur he recognized. Marcus, I have an interesting project here that involves some revolutionary technology. Interested in collaborating? Marcus thought for a moment, then smiled and said, Sure, let's make more wonders. He hung up the phone and took one last look out the window. The past was over and the future awaited. Those who betrayed him paid the ultimate price, and he would move on to create more success. After all, the best revenge is to live life to the fullest. And Marcus Wilson's life is just beginning its most exciting chapter. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.